Hello and welcome to the third part of the tutorial series about modding Falcon BMS. In this video I will introduce you briefly to the database in Falcon BMS and give you a broad overview about how it is set up, how it works in general. But this video is not meant to be exhaustive or all-encompassing. It will primarily cover the basics so that you can develop a principal understanding of how the database is set up. As explained in the last video about the CADA creation, if you want to use a custom database for your separate CADA mod, then you essentially need to link to your own database within the CADA definition file. That's the objects directory, this one here in particular, and you have to mimic the appropriate subfolder structure within your own add-on CADA mod. So under BMS 4.38 /data, the tear data objects folder is for the stock Korea CADA of operations, and every CADA that uses its own database is mimicking this subfolder structure accordingly. Okay, the primary database files are the XML files here, and as these are XML files, you can edit them directly with a text editor or any suitable XML file editor. It looks like this, not necessarily very comfortable to use. So the average user will likely use the BMS editor that is included in Falcon BMS, and you can access the editor from the BMS launcher. What is important before you are going to start the editor, ensure that you have the correct CADA selected. In this case, it's EF2000 Delta. So if we click on the green icon with a small, not very well visible editor label, then the editor opens. And essentially the editor is a graphical user interface that is simply displaying the content of these files. So the different tabs and subtabs that you will find here correspond to the different XML files. So we have the class table CT. So that's that file. Let's see. So you have the object with data. These are the OCD files, if I'm not entirely mistaken. Maybe they are also under FCD feature control data. You have the units with flights, package, squadrons, and so on. The type of unit is dependent on the actual type of a vehicle. We have sensors, infrared data used by infrared search and track sensors for AI controlled aircraft, as well as infrared seekers used by infrared guided air-to-air or surface-to-air missiles. Radar control data, self-explaining, also for aircraft, but also for ground-based air defense systems, so surface-to-air missiles, for example, but also by active radar seekers for weapons in particular, not just launcher platforms. Radar warning data and visual sighting data, and the corresponding Files here would be ICD for infrared control data, RCD radar control data, RWD for radar warning data, VSD for the visual sighting data. We have the vehicles tab for aircraft, ground vehicles, ships, submarines, a separate category. These data are stored in the VCD, so vehicle control data file. That's down here. For weapons, you have multiple subtabs. This first weapons tab are the weapon control data, so WCD that you see here. Sim weapons data that we can see here, SWD. The hard points are actually the weapon load data, WLD here. Squadron stores are the SSD squadron stores data, that's this file. And for rockets, you have the RKT file where rocket related data are located. And then you have models. The models are not located in an XML file, but in the models subfolder. At the moment, we have no particular models included in EF2000 data, and BMS automatically substitutes models from the stock Korea theater of operations. So at the moment, EF2000 data is simply using the corresponding models from the stock KTO theater. But if we add our custom models in the models folder, then these will be used instead of those from the stock KTO. Stock KTO models are only used as a substitute if you have no corresponding models in your folder. But you must be careful if there are separate add-on theaters like Balkans, Israel, whatever. They often have their own models. That's not 100% true, as there are also same models included, but there are also some different models included. And this must be taken into account, especially if you create a separate theater mod that's, for example, based on Balkans, and you want to keep your own size as small as somehow possible. You nevertheless need to include in your folder not only your own models, but also those models from Balkans that do not exist in KTO. All others would be automatically substituted. Okay, so related, let's just briefly take a look at a populated model folder in stock KTO. These model folders are simply numbered folders. Those numbers are a unique ID. That's important because there are links from the database to this model folder number, or let's call it model folder name. At herein you find the model files in BML format corresponding parent dat. For the newer BMS BML version 2 format, let's take the British Typhoon for example. You will also find the texture files in here. That's only true for BML version 2 models. That means those models created in the Blender 3D modeling tool that are exported with the corresponding BMS plugin for Blender. If models are older to the BML v1 format, then the textures are actually included in the Korea OBJ and Korea OBJ high-res subfolders. And in this case, the texture numbers or texture names are just numbers which are called up by the model. You have no names, so names are not accepted for this old format, but for BML v2, as you have seen before, um, flexible flexible names can be defined for those DDS files. What applies to models also applies to textures. So if you have certain textures not included for an object in your own as theater, then it will substitute it with those from stock KTO. Same considerations apply as for external 3D models. Difference between Korea OBJ and Korea OBJ High-Res is that if higher resolution versions of textures exist, you place them here. These have the same numbers as lower resolution files in Korea OBJ. And if you enable, at least in the past it was the case, if you enabled high-res textures in the configuration tool, then the game was using higher resolution textures from this folder if they were available. If not, then they were using stock textures located in this folder. It is important to note that you have in essentially every category you have these index numbers. These are the unique IDs for a specific object, and these numbers are used quite a lot to point to a particular record entry in the database. So that's very important to know, and you can often link to individual record entries from other record entries, but that's something that I will explain in future videos in greater detail than now. And just to illustrate something that's of relevance, let's take, for example, the Eurofighter. In this case, here's no description added. Let's call it Luftwaffe Eurofighter P3E. So we have now a description added. And if we now save this file and you are unsure in which particular database file has the change been saved, then you simply open the folder and sort by changing date, and you can see, okay, today is the 3rd January 1645, so it's just currently created or updated, and then you know, okay, this file has been affected by the change that I have made. Okay. Also important, as soon as you change something in the database and save it, BMS will automatically create this new folder, fe_backup, and here you will find a copy of the pre-save state of the VCD file with its date and time of change. So if you have messed up something, you can find pre-save states herein. Anytime you make a change, a new file will be created depending on which file you're working. And it's just important. So you have automatic backups in theory, but of course you need to remember when have I changed something, which was the last state where something was working. So this is an opportunity for you to recover your database in case you have messed up something. But it's important to notice if you perform a lot of changes, hit save quite a lot of times, and a lot of files will be generated here. And over time this will consume quite a lot of space, so it makes sense to occasionally clean up this folder. You can even completely delete this folder, and next time you will perform a change, then this folder will be automatically recreated. So in case you intend to share your own mods, CEDA mods, with others, ensure that this folder is deleted, otherwise the size of your installation package becomes quite a little bit larger, dependent on how many chains you did perform. It's important to note that many of the database record entries are also referenced by a number of other files. This is in particular of relevance when adding new aircraft, when integrating aircraft into different game modes such as tactical engagement, instant action, or dogfight, for example. So there's more involved than that, but for the average user who simply wants to perform some edits here and there, this should suffice. As said, this basic introduction is not meant to be a very detailed description. In future videos I will cover more details, dive a little bit deeper into everything. As an advanced notice, I do not intend to cover the database parts of static objects and features, ground vehicles, or ships. I will first and foremost focus on the aircraft and airborne weapons, because that's of interest to me, that's of relevant to the mod project, and that's the area I have the appropriate knowledge and experience. So sorry for those who were hoping for the other aforementioned aspects to be covered. This will not be the case. So aircraft and weapons only for the time being. This concludes this lesson, and in the next videos you will learn more about the details, also in conjunction with some other important files that more or less indirectly either rely on the database, reference database record entries, or interact with them. So see you next time. Bye.